Welcome, everyone, to the Reimagine the Future of AI Summit. My name is Kaihan Krippendorff. I'm the co-founder of Outthinker, the organizer with Thinkers 50, and in collaboration with Karim R Lakhani of this summit. And if you've been to any of our prior summits, you probably have a sense of why we're organizing these. These are all to raise money for charity. And we have, in the first two summits, raised over $160,000, and we are thrilled to be able to add to that with you here. In our past summits, many people asked us that they would like to touch on technology in general. And we partnered with Professor Lakhani to organize this summit. Although the title is AI, what I have come to appreciate is this is much more than AI. This is digital, this is data, this is analytics, and ultimately it leads to understanding how the corporate structure at the entrepreneurial level, at the corporate enterprise level, are going to need to transform as the economies of scale shift from efficiency towards something that is more agile. And so what we hope is that you will walk away from here with really a clear sense of what the future might look like and how AI and digital will affect your organizations, regardless of where those organizations are. Marco Iansiti, he is the co-director of the Laboratory for Information Science at Harvard and one of the digital initiatives at Harvard Business School. And he has done a ton of research on AI-centric operating models and the impact of AI and network effects on strategy. He is the co-author with Karim Lakhani of Competing in the Age of AI, and that's what they'll be unfolding for us here. Karim is the founder and co-director of the Laboratory for Innovation Science at Harvard, the principal investigator of the NASA Tournament Laboratory at the Harvard Institute of Quantitative Social Sciences. And he and Professor Iansiti are the leaders of a program called the Harvard Business Analytics Program, who we have partnered with, and many of you are members of that. So we'll leave it here and allow Professor Iansiti and Lakhani to take over. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Kaihan. It's really great to see all the people from around the globe joining us today. I really want to first express my thanks to Kaihan, to the Outthinker team, but especially to Milena Schaefer, who have gotten to know through the Harvard Business Analytics program. Milena approached me and said, you know, the work we've been doing around AI needs a broader audience, and she felt like the Outthinker network would be a great way for us to reach that audience, but also that we do this for charity, given sort of the global pandemic we're all in, and trying to cope with here as well. So I'm delighted here with my friend, co-author, buddy, colleague, sparring partner, Marco Iansiti. We're gonna walk you through the basic thesis of our book. Some of you who are from HBAP, the Harvard Business Analytics program, will have seen bits of this before, but don't fear, we've got lots of new stuff to share with you, because our research program, if anything, has been accelerated due to COVID and what's been going on. So
there's a bit of an update to the title, Karim. I don't know. I don't think that's what we wrote the book about, but somehow things have changed.
Yeah, exactly. So just as a little setup, you know, the book came out in January 7th or something like that. And then Marco and I were touring New York and Boston and Chicago and LA. And then we were in Europe right in the middle of February. And then I was coming back from Paris after giving a talk there with Marco. Marco was heading to Milan. And then, of course, COVID hit, and thankfully he made it back safely. And so yeah, so we're now in this age of COVID and AI, and you'll see the connections between them as we put together. So with that, I'm going to let Marco drive the presentation, and we'll be chit-chatting together. Please do use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask us questions. Please ask us questions throughout the conversation. We'll pause, take the questions, and keep going, and look forward to engaging with all of you as we proceed.
But it's interesting how the book has evolved, the thinking has evolved, and in some ways really been informed by all the struggles and all the challenges and the tragedies, but also the innovation around us during these crazy times. So we'll unpack a little bit of that. But before we do that, let's go back a little bit to the original inspiration for the book. And I know some of you have seen this picture before. once or twice. This is a painting that really inspired Karim and I a few years back around this book. The painting looks a lot and feels a lot like a Rembrandt. It's not actually a Rembrandt. It's made by algorithms and 3D printing on 37 layers of paint after scanning in 3D every single one of Rembrandt's paintings, and really kind of producing, if you like, a meta Rembrandt, the Rembrandt of all Rembrandts. There is no actual person that this thing is drawn from. It fundamentally is just the meta of all the different Rembrandts, owing to one is interpreted by artificial intelligence. And Karim and I kept arguing about this and like, why is this interesting? What do we care about this? What's important about this? And spent a bunch of time really sort of thinking about it. And sometimes we're excited about it, like a bunch of different people look at new technology and like, this is really cool and innovative. Sometimes we were pretty scared by it. It's pretty scary. In fact, I think one of our favorite critiques of this painting is from Jonathan Jones, who is absolutely outraged that they even did this. They even attempted to do something like this. You know, travesty of human trickery is what he calls it, which is sort of very much like the reaction that we all have when we see something that's done by AI that we thought shouldn't be or that previously wasn't. But then we kind of all of a sudden got this moment where we understood why it is this thing is so important. And it kind of came on us all of a sudden. And the reason in some ways why this painting really struck us is the simple insight that relatively simple artificial intelligence, relatively simple algorithms used by a team that's not necessarily a team of Rembrandts or a team of genius can really produce remarkable, truly remarkable things. And so really the interesting thing about this painting is really how fundamentally even simple artificial intelligence, if we define it as weak AI, which is basically any activity that computers can perform now that humans once performed, which is a really basic and broad definition, far away from the stuff of science fictions and sentient beings and that kind of thing. But even simple, weak AI is really fundamentally changing the nature of the economy, the nature of society, and really influencing human nature in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, and this weak AI, is not the place for science fiction. Science fiction, which is I read a ton, so does Marco, is all about strong AI, right? Like basically machines that are replacing humans or smarter than humans and so forth. But weak AI is basically algorithms that are tuned to do just one thing and one thing alone. And then you can have a whole bunch of these algorithms put together that can then be that appear to have sort of magical powers, like facial recognition on your Facebook account. But this weak AI is what we see driving much of the revolution that we sort of see happening in the age of AI. One of our favorite examples came about as we were looking around for cute things, and this is comes from China, from JD Digits. This company that is trying to create sort of financial services products for farmers. And what they realized is that, farmers needed insurance for pigs, but it was really hard to know which pigs were insured. So what they started to do is they say, okay, fine, we will use facial recognition for pigs to help us identify which pigs have actually been insured and which ones have not. But then very quickly they went into saying, oh, we can use this technology to count the number of pigs that farmers have, go after, figure out what they're eating so we know an assessment of their health and when they're ready to go from pig to becoming bacon. Now, the thing about this is, JD Digits is not going to actually be able to make money selling facial recognition software or pig counting software in the broader market, right? That's not what this is about. This is about really taking off-the-shelf technologies like facial recognition, putting it into an application, but opening up a whole new business model for them, because now they can do insurance, now they can do marketplaces around livestock, right? And go to market and help farmers do things that were not possible before. And even this notion of manual pig counting, right? Imagine if you were working in a farm and your job was to count pigs, and imagine all the farms that had to do that. This is a inherently non-scalable process. Pigs move around very fast, there's similar appearances, very hard to do with humans. But with AI, we can do a great job with this. Next slide, Marco. So another example of this weak AI, and to just make the point even clearer that this is easily accessible, is a paper that our lab published last year in the Journal of the American Medical Association for Oncology, where we use crowdsourcing to come up with a new AI-based solution for radiation therapy targeting. So in about 8 weeks' time, we were able to use a crowd of about 100 people participating with us to generate this code. This code is as good as the average radiation oncologist at Harvard, but and better than anything that has been done commercially. But also, what's interesting is that it only costs us, about 80 grand and 8 weeks to create. The thing to note also is that I'm a co-author on this paper, but the last time I took biology was in 10th grade, and I didn't do it so hot. I became an electrical engineer instead of going into biology. But it sort of tells you that we can take code and algorithms that's out there and apply it to these problems at scale.
So what happens when you take hundreds, if not thousands, of these algorithms and develop them in a very agile fashion and begin to use them to really form the core of an organization? That is essentially the story of Ant Financial, which is also kind of an inspiring one for us. Interesting organization, started with Alipay. Alipay was a payment system that was put in place by Alibaba to essentially enable peer-to-peer commerce in China, as people didn't fully trust each other in the early days of Chinese e-commerce. And so they needed to have a payment system that could put the payments in escrow until the transaction was validated. That's how Alipay was born. Eventually, it grew up to be a major payment system, and today it's actually the largest payment system in the world. Back in 2013, Alipay itself was spun out of Alibaba as an independent organization called Ant Financial. Ant Financial, in classic way, ants as in small little insects, every little transaction, lots and lots and lots of little transactions. And as Ant Financial continued to ramp up its transactions and accumulate data, it began to create all kinds of additional products and services that were essentially enabled by the data, integrated with the data in a centralized, sophisticated data platform. First one to launch was Yuebao, which is now the world's largest money market fund. Jima Credit, credit system rolled out to hundreds of millions of people in China. My Bank, loan granting bank, known for a process called 310, where a loan application takes 3 minutes to fill out. It takes 1 second by My Bank to actually approve or deny the loan, and 0 as in the amount of human intervention in that process. So highly scalable, incredible process, and for Fortune for wealth management, et cetera, and spitting out a huge variety of different services. Alipay has become an incredibly rich and interesting app, essentially almost like an operating system for your own life. And as you do that, accumulates even more data that obviously then launches even more services. And for example, recently they launched a health insurance service. Now it's signing up something like 100 million plus Chinese consumers already on their health insurance service. This company valued at hundreds of billions of dollars. A good fraction of the world's largest, most valuable bank, with only about 10, 20,000 people as employees, which is a small fraction actually of what large US and European-based global banks tend to employ, doing a fraction of the financial business. Very interesting organization, essentially works in a fundamentally different way.
Yeah, so the way we think about this in our analysis is that we want to be thinking about companies in terms of 2 dimensions, their business model and their operating model. The business model is all about how you create value for customers and why customers want to come to you and either transact with you versus your competitors or not doing anything at all. And then value capture is how, when you generate this value, how you capture some portion of that value. So we see that AI is impacting business models for companies, but also the operating models, how they can deliver value through scale, how many customers they can serve, how many, what they offer them to them in terms of products, and how they learn and improve and innovate. So the operating model and the business model come hand in hand. And firms like Ant use AI to drive sort of this digital scale and scope, right? So just think about a company like Ant with 1.2 billion users. There's no way you can have manual processes at the core of this system. You can't have a bank manager looking a customer in the eye and saying, yes, you get this loan or you don't get this loan. You have to be set up in a completely different or different way than a traditional bank would be, either in China or even in the US. And so these guys, are using AI at their core. They have a network and a platform set up so that they can generate a ton of value from these interactions that are happening across their platform. And then the whole idea that we sort of are pushing is that the humans are at the periphery of the organization. It's the machines that are connecting the entire platform and the network that are at the core that drive efficiency gains and scale and scope inside of these companies.
So Satya Nadella talks about AI as the new runtime. In computer science, the runtime is really the engine of execution. And you can see this in the Ant Financial model and a variety of other organizations built this way or transformed into this model, in how really fundamentally the algorithms and the software fed by the amounts of data are the engine of execution. And we still have human workers, we still have managers, we still have people, but they're not on the critical path of actually delivering the value to the customer as much as possible. So that critical path process, the bottlenecks, if you like, are embedded in the software, which makes the system much, much more scalable and easy to connect to other systems, through APIs, easy to adapt and learn through additional data and so on. And as a function of this, the more data the system accumulates, the better it gets, right? And so there is this kind of engine of improvement and learning that is driven by the data that is flowing through the different kinds of networks and the different kinds of systems that the system plugs into. And so the scale, scope of learning possibilities of an operating system built like this are completely different from that of a traditional organization. At the core of this kind of system is what we talk about in the book as an AI factory, a data factory, essentially, which is really a signal to the transformation of how data is thought about and processed. In some ways, very analogous to the transformation that we saw in manufacturing, with standardization and assembly lines really emerging with industrial processes back 100 years ago. And in some way, the AI factory is fundamentally the industrialization of data processing, the industrialization of data gathering, cleaning, normalization, integration of data across different parts of the organization, and then pulling it together and productizing it together with the right algorithms and so on to power up the core of the operating model that makes the firm function.
Yeah, and if I may add here, so what is the AI factory producing at the end, right? The AI factory at the end is doing three things. It's making predictions about some future state of the world in your business. Will a customer come to me or not? Will the customer leave me or not? Is there fraud here or not? You name it. Is the machine going to work or not? Some prediction task. AI factory also helps you with pattern recognition across your data, right? What are the different patterns that I'm seeing across my data, across my operations, right? And it drives automation. So the AI factories are doing predictions, right? Pattern recognition and automation at scale. So Tariq has a question in here about how do you think the AI will influence the global auto industry? If you sort of think about this, Tariq, in fact, already, if you think about how Uber and Lyft and the self-driving, the ride-sharing companies have transformed the auto industry by making autos as a service instead of as a capital good by consumers. Most of that has been driven by the AI factories that are inside of Uber and Lyft and Didi and so forth that enable this to happen. And as we see this further transformation of the auto industry going through, this is going to matter even more so. And what I would add to this conversation is that in fact, the AI factory we showed you is the same in all companies, right? So the auto industry's AI factory is going to look the same as what Google has, what Facebook has, or even what McDonald's has, right? Or what JD Digits has, right? So the AI factory is going to look the same. The actual physical factories at McDonald's or at a BMW look very different, but the AI factory is going to look the same.
It's really a different way, a different philosophy, a different architecture with which to solve operating problems. And it's a fundamentally different way to build a company. You know, traditional firms, whether they're auto industries, they're hotel management companies, they're business schools, like the Harvard Business School, whether they are hospitals or what have you, are fundamentally built around silos. They have diminishing returns. As the organization gets larger, it becomes more unwieldy, harder to manage, harder to scale. And so what do? We break it down into smaller pieces to try to scale it some more, because managing a human-centered organization is very complex. It's very hard. It takes a lot of time as we do this. And so the organizations that we see running most of our economy and that we've seen for 100 years are essentially these siloed structures where you go along and look at their divisions, their groups, their SBUs, their teams, their functions, their departments. All these different silos and all these different modules of organizations are fundamentally trying to scale an organization that is intrinsically hard to scale. A digital centered organization, AI first company, whatever you like to call it, fundamentally has a very different kind of behavior, right? It tends to not add a lot of value because there's a lot of investment up front. A payment system doesn't add value until it builds network effects and grows, or until the data becomes enough to start making the problem interesting. So a digital business adds very little value typically up front, but then as it scales at an increasingly rapid clip, and eventually can overwhelm a traditional business in a specific use case. And so you actually see examples in our economy of traditional firms and digital organizations or firms built on a digital operating model that are colliding, like Airbnb versus Marriott. Pre-pandemic, potentially more interesting than now, as we don't have much hospitality going on these days, but in the auto industry, Ford versus companies like Waymo coming along with a fundamentally different business model and even more built on a very fundamentally very different operating model. A company like HSBC, traditional banks versus Ant Financial, and so on.
And note here, though, and we're going to hint to you at COVID. So what happens with these traditional businesses, right? What happens is that they don't understand exponential growth. They don't understand exponential growth, so they're at the top end of the curve, and they go, "Oh, we got plenty of room. We're fine. Everything's going to be fine. These digital businesses aren't adding that much more value compared to where we're at," and so they ignore these exponential growth settings until it's a collision and it's too late. This is the same thing that's happened with COVID and the whole world, right? Starting in January, late December, we see the COVID virus grow exponentially, but the beginning stages are very flat. Beginning stages are such that, in fact, we don't recognize them, we ignore them, we don't understand exponential systems. Marco, if you just go back to that last slide again. The collision slide, Marco. So what happens is that when we hear about flattening the curve, what people are worried about is that the hospital capacity is going to collide with the rate of infection at COVID, right? And this is the worry that people have, that health experts have, is that the exponential growth rates are going to tap into the flat capacity that most hospitals have today. And so the thing to note is that the digital models grow exponentially. This disease, COVID, also grows exponentially, and this collision that we sort of talked about in our book, pre-COVID times, right, basically is being replicated now in this disease time. And so human beings and organizations don't have good ways to think about exponential systems and how to deal with them, and that's why we see these collisions happen.
And that's why we see enormous numbers of traditional organizations transforming themselves and attempting through a lot of hard work, going from traditional siloed structures with technologies and data is essentially isolated in individual silos and individual groups, gradually through increasing integration, increasing steps to connect across the different businesses, build a universal data layer, built an industrial process to store data and clean data and normalize and integrate data, and gradually expose it through APIs and let teams go out there and build different algorithms. And we see a number of different traditional organizations, from Novartis to Verizon, having invested years and time, trying as hard as they can to go up this curve. Now, what we see right now is that kind of transformation that we aspired to before and thought was a really cool thing to think about is no longer an option. What we see here is mobile data, which in just 2 weeks shows that from March 9th to March 23rd, the US economy went into remission. Essentially, the difference in daily distance traveled plummeted across different counties in the US, and digital transformation came from being a nice to do, and inspiration and innovation, and sort of transformative experience, to a must do. It's no longer an option. And we see across the board right now, whether you are at a company like Ant, or a company at the other end of the spectrum like the Harvard Business School, that virtualization of processes, automation, transformation is being done on every possible avenue.
Yeah, and we have to say here that, near the conclusion of the book, we sort of talk about executives having time to respond, right? That we saw in certain industries, the industries tipping and things happening, but they had time to respond. I think COVID changed this instantaneously for everybody. And made a huge impact on this aspect of how you need to transform.
And ultimately, the reason is, in many ways, is this one, right? So apart from obviously the need for virtualization, doing everything on Zoom or WebEx as much as you can, it's also the fact that traditional systems like healthcare systems, retail systems, supply chains are fundamentally very difficult to ramp and ramp up and ramp down. They respond like traditional organizations, whereas if you look at sort of the impact of the virus, it has these non-linear spikes and a huge amount of uncertainty. If you just look at the error bar on this curve, sort of predicting mortality rates in Texas, this is from back in May, it's just huge. And so it's incredible, it's impossible, essentially, almost impossible for a traditional system to respond with an agility that is required in a time where there's so much uncertainty in our economy and in our sort of global supply chains. Some companies, interestingly enough, are doing some cool things in the time of coding. One of those organizations that we like to talk about and we spend a lot of time on since the book is Moderna.
Yeah, so this company, thankfully, has a vaccine candidate that is actually in phase 2 trial. We're doing a bunch of research with them about how they were able to achieve this, and they see themselves as a digital biotech. So in our book, we talked a lot about examples from the usual suspects, right? Amazon's, Microsoft's, Facebook's, Google's of the world, Alibaba and Financials of the world, JD Digits of the world. Moderna's job is not to do anything with those things, but is to actually make drugs. And so what they were able to do using their AI factory at their core, and by the way, we're gonna have the Chief Digital Officer of Moderna join us at noon to talk about what they're doing. But as a hint, right, they were able to take the sequence of the virus and create a drug candidate in 42 days. Okay, and they were the first U.S. company to actually have a drug candidate in FDA at all. But just think, 42 days from the time the virus sequence was put out there to a drug candidate. Now, what's going on? Now, what's going on with them is that they have a new technology called mRNA, which is by the way an information molecule, right? It takes the body's cells to produce the drugs the body needs, right, through mRNA. So it's already an information system, but everything else from the time they do the design, the time they actually get it produced, the time they do testing has been fully digitized. And they're able to get this speed because they have put the AI at the center of what they're all doing. And this is a great example that we're writing a lot about now to help us understand how sort of traditional industries, sort of the non-information centric industries, can in fact think of themselves as information companies, think of themselves as digital companies, and then drive towards helping humanity. Right now, we don't know if in fact this vaccine is going to work. There are lots of uncertainties. It's the first time you have an mRNA vaccine. NIH is working closely with them. We'll see. But as a proof point that we could apply this type of an agility and this type of a process to something that has not been done before in medicine is quite attractive.
25 days from sequencing to vaccine batch. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and actually the actual time for them, it took them to actually create the vaccine candidate was 4 hours. So everything else was processed, right? Purification, making sure 4 hours that you design the work.
Well, you know, actually, although I had to say Moderna is super cool. Although my favorite example is frankly Mass General. Mass General Hospital, one of the world's oldest hospitals, actually just 215 years old, so long pre-US Civil War. We're talking about an old organization here, older, about twice as old as the Harvard Business School, in fact, which actually did an amazing job to respond to the challenges, and it's still doing an amazing job to respond to the challenges of the pandemic. And a lot of this was through thoughtful planning and a huge respect for data and analytics as a philosophy, but also, you know, building up a system almost on the fly, starting back in January when they already predicted that this thing was going to come along. They did not wait around, and they basically put together a control tower system, information system to put all the information together, work closely with a bunch of people from MIT to model out a number of their operating model processes. Not the most beautiful information systems you will ever see, but a very continuous and integrated flow of data to give them really great predictions on all kinds of supplies that they would need, anything from masks to ventilators, as well as deploying a number of different, very simple AI to really help them match their capacity to the demand fluctuations of the virus. This is Kelly Whitbold, one of my favorite people out there. She's an attending at Mass General and actually really working to help us all out. But she's also a telemedicine fellow, and she's very excited about the digital transformation going on there. And she talks about, this is her quote, how I thought I'd have to spend the next 10 years trying to basically validate my career in telemedicine, but the virus has done it for me in just a matter of weeks. And again, huge impact on very traditional organizations as well. Another interesting example comes out of Sweden, global company, but very interesting. You know, imagine yourself at the beginning of the pandemic, and your company is defined by its stores, the big blue boxes. Like, Karim, what are you going to do?
Yeah, this is crazy, right? So like I think all of us have some IKEA furniture, or if not our whole house full of IKEA furniture. So we're so used to shopping at the big blue boxes. Again, Barbara Martin Coppola will also be at the session at noon, talking about her experience with digital transformation in COVID. Just to give you a preview, right? They were able to basically shift everything to e-commerce. Right, their stores became dark warehouses to basically do fulfillment. But interestingly enough, what we've seen happen is that what they anticipated would be years of transformation in their business, both mindset change. My good friend Sadal Neely is on here. We talk a lot about the mindset change needed by organizations to adopt this. This mindset shift had to happen in 3 weeks. There was no business but e-commerce. They had to move everything to the cloud. They had to basically start to use AI for product recommendations, for helping the customers expand their baskets, right? And to actually centralize their data repositories. And what's amazing is that now they're seeing that, in fact, instead of this being a cannibalization story, what we're seeing instead is that this is really a complementarity story, and that companies like IKEA now have to sort of invest even more in digital, both the digital mindset of their organizations and so forth, but bringing technology in and actually enable them to rethink their business model and the operating model that we've talked about.
So it's an amazing time that right now, and with AI and AI first operating model, there are opportunities to deploy use cases everywhere. I mean, the reason why the transformation needs to be an architectural one, and you need to build these horizontal assets, is really to make it as easy as possible for a variety of different people to go and work in an agile fashion together in small teams and deploy algorithms across the board. So anything from customer intelligence to edge surveillance and security, smart networking, research and discovery, whatever it is that drives your operating model can probably benefit.
Yeah, and I just want to call on a question that Jay Lopez asked us, which is like, look, I see pilots everywhere in all these established companies, but rarely do pilots scale from pilots to actually having an impact in organizations. And Jay Lopez, that's exactly the point. I mean, I think we can do pilots galore, but if you're not committed to actually rechanging your processes, right, to put AI at the core of your organizations, it's not going to work. I mean, the IKEA story is the same thing. They had to put AI at the core. They had to actually use the algorithms to help the merchandisers to rethink what they show to their customers.
It was an architectural transformation even for IKEA, right? So they went, and in 3 weeks, we built 13 different country websites.
Exactly.
On a single model, right? So they're taking all these different individual sort of siloed businesses, each one doing their own pilots, if you like, or inventing their own individual solutions and coordinating their approach, centralizing it in a coordinated and integrated data platform that powers up customer recommendations with the right tailoring and personalization around the world. And the same thing even for a company like Moderna, like Stefan Bancel talks about how they have a single system of record for everything they do, not just in R&D, but really across the board.
Yeah, so, and note Marcello Damiani, who is the CDO of Chief Digital Officer for Moderna, who'll join us at noon. He's also the Chief Process Excellence Officer, right? So he has the mandate at the C-suite level to change processes in research, in clinical, in manufacturing, to optimize what AI can do. If you just throw AI on existing old manual processes, it's just going to make them more efficient and make them more crappy, right? You actually want to rethink your processes and put them into a new formation.
And of course, I mean, this is everybody realizes this, but COVID is accelerating every single one of these things, from the need for agility to the need for virtualizing maintenance to the need for getting intelligence and purchasing trends, the need to integrate information on supply chains to do a better job to drive agility there. It's fundamentally generating opportunities for AI everywhere that we can see, and AI can really help a lot on some of these fundamental needs that we're now trying to have. But along with the opportunities, we also have challenges, right, Karim? And so as we scale AI-enabled processes, as we drive increasing scope and impact, as we drive learning and personalization and customization with AI, the ethics also change, and many problems are amplified by these kinds of trends.
Yeah, in fact, we wrote a chapter about this in our book. This was the hardest chapter to write. We debated a ton, because we're talking a lot about like, we're business school professors. What do we know about ethics? That's done by the philosophy people across the river or the law people. But as we dug into it, this actually has to become the core of how businesses need to be thinking about AI. Because just for example, we talk about this, you can bias at scale, right? You can exponentially bias people, right? If you put these algorithms at play and they're not fair, they're not transparent. So, for this matter alone, the next session that starts at 10 is really focused on responsible AI. We have Ayanna Howard and Mark Sermon to really talk about the issues around AI and what do business leaders need to know about this, because this is no longer outsourced to the legal department. This actually is both an engineering challenge, a technology challenge, and a business challenge as well. Because if we don't do this, right? If you don't take this seriously, right, you're going to be up for a ton of harm, both with your customers and with policymakers as they realize what's going on. So several of you have asked these questions, Manu especially, about the role of tech giants and also what happens with jobs and so forth. Those will be discussed coming up in the next session.
And of course, as with the opportunities, COVID also amplifies the ethical challenges. And we see this across every single category that we identify, anything from cybersecurity attacks that are COVID related to privacy issues around tracking apps to the concentration of wealth and influence because of the many people that cannot easily digitize and so are being left out of the economy as of now. Let me skip down for a minute to the, I want to share sort of one final slide on this. Give me 1 second here. There we go.
It's called singing and dancing.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. Me talking a little too much, so let me talk a little bit. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so here we go. Let's skip over to the end. We skipped a couple of slides. Too much blah, blah, blah by Karim and I, but interesting topics. So I think as we go through all of this, I think one of the things that really stays with us, and we're so grateful for you to all be here and think through this with us and debate these issues with us, because fundamentally it's a time for action. It's a time for really thinking about these challenges in a proactive way. Thank you all for coming in and helping us understand and anticipate what's going to happen in our environment. I look forward to the many discussions later today. The message is, of course, to deploy AI and drive digital transformation right now, just as a matter of survival and as a matter of adaptation to the many challenges that are facing us today. As a fundamental point, architecture is really critical to innovation and sustained transformation. It's sort of back to the why do my pilots don't work? Because essentially we're putting pilots and experiment as an overlay on an architecture that is not matched to how an AI-driven organization, an AI-first organization needs to behave. And we see this in benchmarking that we've done and surveys that we've run across, at this point, since the book was launched, literally dozens and dozens of companies. Need to think carefully about the ethics of and security of digital skill, scope, and learning as we deploy more and more of this and really define it and build it from the ground up, and ultimately help increasing part of the population in greater need, which is a huge challenge with the pandemic, as great part of the economy, over 50% of the US economy, and more than over 50% of the world economy is right now not on a digital path. And so as we digitize and transform much of the economy, there are inherently all kinds of social problems and risks and challenges that are being amplified.